animation. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Let's start by creating a two scripts. Let's create a player script and let's create a sprite animator script. Okay. And for now in our scene, we're just going to create an empty object, call it player, and add a player to it and a sprite animator. Okay. With that in mind, let's jump onto code. Let's have a look here. So for the player, we can delete all of this. And we can delete all of this as well for the animator. There we go. Okay, cool. So the idea is basically that the player has a reference to the sprite animator. So let's create a sprite animator. Let's make that public. Called sprite animator, right? And for example, on start, we're going to play an animation. Yeah. So what we would like to do is somehow to call our animator and say play animation idle animation, right? And maybe also play a walk animation. Okay. And by the end of this video, you'll be this will be working. But this is sort of what we would like to have, right? You sort of have an animator that takes care, and the only thing you do is you put in a sort of an animation, and it can play that. Okay. So before implementing any of this, let's jump back to the animator and think about what an animation actually is, right? So all it really is for now is a list of frames and a frame rate. But you don't really need more, right? So let's create a sprite animation class, just like this, and we're gonna have a public float frame rate, and we're gonna have a public sprite array called frames. Okay, and we're also gonna make this class serializable so that it gets properly drawn and serialized by Unity. Okay, cool. So basically what we can do now with this is we can create a public sprite animation, idle animation, and a walk animation if you want. Right? Okay. We still don't have anything happening here, so what we can do is we can create a public void that takes in a sprite animation, like this, and maybe let me put the player next to this so we can see everything at the same time. Okay, and maybe let's just write a debug.log play animation. Okay, so you can see now that what we're doing here is we basically on start we're playing an idle animation, and immediately after we're playing like a walk animation, and of course this will be played at the same time. So for now I'm going to remove one of them. We're going to come back to this later. And so basically the setup is the player, as soon as the game starts, we're going to play the idle animation, which basically executes this piece of code. So now if you go back to Unity, we can assign a sprite animator to the player here, basically drag and drop this in, and we can already see we have our animations. Okay, so let's set a frame rate on both of these of 10, and I can drag and drop in my sprites here, so for the idle animation and for the run animation. Okay, yeah, of course if I now press play, nothing will really happen. It would just say play animation, which means that this is being executed and this method is being called and this happens. Okay. Okay. So basically we have done we haven't done absolutely anything, right? We are basically the only thing we really have done is build up a quick structure and to sort of show how we're going to use this. Um, so what we want to do now is play this animation, right? So the first thing is let's talk about the idea on how we're going to play the animation. So we're going to have an update loop in the sprite animator, and basically um, every frame, right? We're going to count up. Well, let's define a frame index. So we're going to count up by 1 plus equals 1 every frame, right? So, and when we start the animation, we start at frame 0, and then every frame, this counter is going up by 1. And all we really have to do is set sprites corresponding to this index, right? So let's add a sprite renderer. Okay. And basically every frame, what we're going to do, we also need to assign the animation. So current animation equals sprite animation, like so. And then we can do sprite animation. Oops. Then we can do sprite renderer. Or we can, yeah, sprite equals the current animation at the index. Okay. Whoops. No. Frames at the index. Oh my god. Frame index. And we can do that. Okay. So now what we're doing is as soon as this is called, we're setting the first sprite. Yes. And maybe let me comment this out. And let's see if this works. So we are putting in this animation. We're setting the index to 0, and then we're setting the first frame. Okay. So we need a sprite renderer on our player. There we go. Assign it. We can close these up. Now if I press play, boom. Okay. We have the first frame of the idle animation. And I guess if we go here and put in the walk animation, then we should get the first frame of the walk animation. There you go. Okay. Cool. So that's working. Now, what we basically want to do is every frame we want to show the next frame. Okay. And so we're going to count up by 1 and then take that frame. So basically, the first frame is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. One problem is that, of course, we will quickly run out of frames. So what we do is we clamp this back down to 0 once it reaches the length. So one way of doing this would be if current animation dot frame, whoops, dot frames dot length. So basically, if the index frame index is bigger than the length minus 1, we'll get it down frame index equals 0. And there is a much more elegant way of writing this, which we can also look into. So basically, you could achieve the same thing by doing a modulo operation with the length of the array, like this. So basically, you say frame index equals, so this in full, it looks like this. So frame index equals frame index modulo this, which means that if this number is bigger or equal to this, it will be set down to 0, right? Otherwise, it's the number. It's basically the rest of a division. If you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. These two things are equivalent, right? I'd much rather use the second one. Okay. Let's have a look at what happens. Because now we are basically counting up, making sure we don't go out of bounds, and then setting the frame. Okay. It's kind of working. But yeah, you can see that the the indicated frame rate that we have here is not being taken into account, right? Um, but that has an easy fix, right? So what we can do, we can introduce a timer, um, and we can introduce a frame duration, which is basically going to be the current animation. Well, 1 divided the frame rate of the current animation. Okay. And then simply put, we do timer plus equals time.delta time. So we count up every frame. And as long as the timer is smaller than the frame duration, we return out. So we don't do anything. We don't count up and we're not setting new frames. And once it is bigger, we reset the timer back down to 0 and we play the frames. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So basically now we have the frames taken into account. And if we play with this, if we set this to 20, now it should be twice as fast, right? Yeah, he's getting excited. He's getting really excited here. 30. All right, cool. Right, so that is basically it, right? This whole thing is making sure that we have these sort of animations. And I think as a proof of concept, let's quickly um, uh, use our animator to play 2 different animations. So get key down, input key code dot I for idle, and we'll play the idle animation, and then else if input get key down, and then we do W, we'll play the walk, oops, the walk animation. Yeah, so basically just as a little test, when we press the key I, we'll play the idle animation. When we press W, we'll play the walk animation. Let's have a look at that. There you go, idle animation. Now press W, starts running. Go back to idle. And that is basically it. Here you can see in the sprite renderer, you can see the frames being updated. And there's not much more to it. Now to expand the system, you just need to add more animations to a player. But you're not tied to any weird like string naming or anything. So this is really, really straightforward. There's nothing complicated here. I hope this was somewhat clear. If not, please write in the comments down below. See you in the next one. Cheers.